everyone, my name is Angela and this is going to be my spoiler-free review of Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I do not know where my dust jacket went, so I'm just going to put up a picture. So I want to start off with my history with the Hunger Games series. I first saw the movie when it came out. I believe I was in like 7th grade and was so obsessed with it. I immediately went out and read all of the books, and then when the other movies came out, I saw them as soon as they came out but already knew what was going to happen. And then I reread them at some point as a young teen, maybe in like 8th or 9th grade, but I haven't reread the series since. I did read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes in 2023 and I gave it 5 stars and really loved it, and also really loved the movie. So when they announced Haymitch's story, I was really excited and knew I was going to read it as soon as I could, and that's what I did. If you haven't read this book yet and you want to know if you should read it, I would definitely recommend that you do read it, but I don't think that you should dive into this book without having read any of the others. I would definitely recommend reading the books in publication order. Suzanne Collins does a really good job at interweaving different characters and different lore and different little moments that turn out to mean a lot more than you thought they did when you first read them. It's just really intricately woven, and I do think that you should read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes before you read this book, because I think that will help you with some of those little connections. One last thing before I talk about the book, I did not remember the backstory that we got about Haymitch's games. I know that you do learn a little bit about Haymitch's past in the original trilogy, but I don't really think that those moments are in the films, and so I personally did not know how Haymitch's game, I mean, obviously I knew he was gonna, live and be the victor because he's alive in the Hunger Games books, and this takes place obviously before that, but yeah, I didn't know any of the details, so reading this was as if I didn't know much about Haymitch. I read most of this book physically, but I did listen to a little bit of the audiobook along with it, and I ended up giving this book 3.75 stars. I do use quarter ratings to make my ratings more specific, and I felt like this book was just a classic example of a little bit worse than a 4-star book, just not quite reaching that 4-star level for me personally. The book opens with Haymitch's birthday, which is July 4th, which is the day of the reaping, and we are watching the events of the reaping day, which of course results in Haymitch going into the Hunger Games. There are a lot of characters that we know from the original trilogy that make appearances in this book, and it's really interesting to see them as younger people and how they're connected with Haymitch, how they're connected to each other. I think Haymitch as a 16-year-old is a really likable character that everyone can empathize with and easily enjoy reading in his perspective, and I think it's such an interesting contrast to the Haymitch that we see in the original trilogy and the movies. Haymitch is obviously like an alcoholic. He's always drunk and kind of cracking jokes about everything, doesn't seem to take anything too seriously just because he is always drunk. And obviously he does end up being a friend to Katniss in the original trilogy, but he certainly doesn't seem like the most put together person, let's just say. And that's not at all how we see him as a 16-year-old boy, so it's really interesting to see how Haymitch becomes who he is in the original trilogy. I will say I much preferred the first half of this book to the second half. I feel like the lead up to the Quarter Quell was a lot more interesting and engaging for me. I enjoyed seeing Haymitch interact with the side characters, seeing his life with his family and his friend and his girlfriend in District 12. I think once we got into the Quarter Quell, things progressed in a way that felt not too different from other books, and I felt like there wasn't really anything too surprising or shocking or mind-blowing that happened during the games to really like blow my mind. I wasn't obsessed and on the edge of my seat the way that I was during the games in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes or the other Hunger Games books, and part of that I do think is, of course you do know that Haymitch is going to live, and so there is a little bit of that element of the surprise taken out of it, the tension taken out of it, just because you do know how it ends. And even though I didn't remember those details from the original trilogy about Haymitch's ending, I did actually predict how everything was going to turn out by the last page, and so I was maybe looking for a little bit more of a surprise factor or a twist or something that was really going to blow my mind, and I just think that it was a little predictable, which feels silly to say because a lot of these details were already given to us, but I think for me it just didn't grab me the way that the other Hunger Games books have. And I don't think that that is due to a lack of quality. I think that it's just a personal preference and the fact that I connected more with the other books. I don't think that this book was rushed or poorly written or poorly put together or plotted. Not at all. I just think that my reading experience didn't evoke those strong feelings as much as they have in other readers. I know there are tons of people who are reading this and giving it 5 stars, so that is very much just a personal thing. I thought that this book was a really interesting exploration of propaganda and was unfortunately really relevant to the political climate of the United States right now. I heard someone online say that this book really feels like a prequel to Catching Fire, whereas The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes feels like a prequel to the first Hunger Games book, and I feel like that makes a lot of sense, and you would think that I would like this book more because Catching Fire is my favorite installment of the original trilogy. That's just not the case, but I did still think that this was really good. I think maybe I would have enjoyed this a little bit more if it had been longer and had included a bit more of Haymitch's life after he wins the Hunger Games. I think that maybe would have held my interest more, just because at some point I think I was losing a little bit of interest during the actual time in the arena. But overall, I think Suzanne Collins had a lot to say, and I think that there are a lot of cool and interesting connections to the other plot lines and other characters from the other books. I'm glad that this book exists. I'm glad that I read it, and I really hope that Suzanne Collins continues to write these books. If you've read this book, please let me know what you thought. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more bookish content from me, and I hope you have a lovely week.